Working the night shift at an old factory on the outskirts of Pittsburgh had become routine for me. I had been doing it for years, same quiet nights, same echoing hallways, and the same empty, lifeless atmosphere. Most of the factory had been shut down for years, with only a few sections still active for storage. I worked alone, acting as the night watchman, patrolling the building to make sure nothing went wrong. It was boring, but it paid the bills. One night, something felt different. The usual silence seemed heavier, almost oppressive. Around 2 a.m., I heard a strange noise coming from the basement, a dull thud, followed by a scraping sound. It was a part of the building that had been abandoned for over a decade, left to rot after the factory downsized in the late 80s. No one ever went down there. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was just the old pipes or the wind rattling through the cracks in the walls. But the sound didn't stop. It grew louder, more persistent, like someone dragging something heavy across the floor. My curiosity got the better of me, and I grabbed my flashlight. I told myself it was probably nothing, just some animal that got in or old equipment shifting. But deep down, I felt uneasy. The stairs leading to the basement were covered in dust, undisturbed for who knows how long. As I descended, the air grew colder, and the smell of mildew hit me hard. The scraping sound stopped the moment my foot hit the basement floor. I scanned the area with my flashlight, and that's when I saw it. A small door in the far corner, one I had never noticed before. It was partially open. I hesitated but pushed the door fully open. Inside, I found what looked like an old living space, an ancient cot, a rusted sink, and personal belongings scattered around. There were old clothes, books, even a half-used pack of cigarettes. But what really caught my attention was the calendar hanging on the wall. It was from 1987, with each day crossed out in thick, red ink, except for one, the day I found it. A chill ran down my spine. The air in the room felt suffocating, like something was watching me. I backed out slowly, my heart racing, and bolted upstairs, locking the basement door behind me. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just some forgotten relic from the past. But I couldn't get that calendar out of my mind. Why was that one day left untouched? Who had been living down there, and where had they gone? The next morning, everything turned upside down. One of my coworkers, Dave, was found dead in the break room. His face was pale, and his eyes were wide open, frozen in a look of sheer terror. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, nothing to explain what had happened to him. The police came and investigated, but they found no clues, nothing that could explain how a seemingly healthy man had just dropped dead with that expression on his face. I couldn't shake the feeling that what I had found in the basement was connected. Maybe I had disturbed something that had been hiding down there for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. The factory had always felt eerie, but now it felt haunted. The shadows seemed darker, the quiet more sinister. I quit my job the next day. I couldn't go back, not after what I had seen, not after what had happened to Dave. But even now, weeks later, I can't forget the feeling I had in that basement, like I wasn't alone. Sometimes, late at night, I wake up with the same suffocating feeling, like something is watching me from the shadows. I try to convince myself it's just my imagination, but deep down, I know better. Something was in that factory, something that didn't want to be found. I had been working the night shift at a distribution warehouse in New Jersey for about 6 months. The job wasn't exciting, but it was steady, and the quiet nights made it easy to zone out. The warehouse was massive, filled with crates and boxes that stretched down long, dimly lit aisles. I worked alone most nights, just keeping an eye on things and locking up when my shift ended. One night, things took a strange turn. I was walking past the loading dock when I noticed that one of the forklifts had been moved. It wasn't where I'd left it earlier in the evening. The odd thing was, I was the only one with the key for that particular forklift. I stood there for a moment, staring at it, trying to figure out how it had moved. Maybe I had just forgotten I'd parked it there. But no, I was sure of where I had left it. I'd brushed it off and continued with my rounds, trying not to let my imagination run wild. But later, as I was getting ready to lock up for the night, I heard footsteps echoing through the empty aisles. It was faint at first, but unmistakable, the soft thud of boots on the concrete floor. My heart started racing. I grabbed my flashlight and started toward the sound, shining the beam down the dark, endless rows of crates. "Hello?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. No response. The warehouse was supposed to be empty, but the footsteps continued, growing louder and then suddenly stopping. I followed the sound to the back of the warehouse, where the lights barely reached. My flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. That's when I saw him. A man sitting on a crate. His hands and feet were tied, and his face was covered in bruises. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with fear, like he had been waiting for someone to save him. I froze, unsure of what to do. Before I could even take a step toward him, I heard more footsteps, this time faster and heavier. A group of masked men appeared out of nowhere, emerging from the shadows. They moved quickly, grabbing the man and dragging him away before I could react. I shouted, "Hey, stop!" But it was no use. They disappeared into the night, taking the bound man with them. I stood there, stunned, my heart pounding in my chest. It had all happened so fast that I couldn't process it. I immediately called the police, explaining everything I had seen. When they arrived, they searched the warehouse thoroughly, but they found nothing. No signs of struggle, no evidence of anyone else being there. It was like the whole thing had never happened. The officers gave me puzzled looks, and I could tell they didn't believe me. They chalked it up to stress, exhaustion, maybe even a trick of the mind. But I knew what I had seen. A few weeks passed, and I tried to forget about that night. But one morning, I received a package at my door. There was no return address, just my name scrawled on the front. Inside was a note, written in shaky handwriting. "You shouldn't have seen that." My stomach dropped, and a cold sweat broke out on my skin. That was it for me. I quit the job and never went back to the warehouse. Even now, I can't shake the feeling that someone is watching me. Every time I hear footsteps behind me, I remember that man sitting on the crate, waiting for help that never came. Working the night shift at a convenience store wasn't exactly thrilling, but it paid the bills. My name is Sarah, and I've been doing this for about a year now. It's usually quiet around 3 a.m., with just a few regulars coming in for cigarettes or snacks. But one night, things got weird, real weird. Rob, one of the regulars, came in around his usual time. But that night, something was off. He looked pale, like he had seen a ghost or something. His hands were shaking as he came up to the counter and handed me a phone. "Please, just keep this safe," he said, his voice low and panicked. Before I could ask what was going on, he rushed out of the store. I stood there, staring at the phone, wondering what the hell I had just gotten myself into. Minutes later, a man in a black hoodie walked in. His face was hidden, but I could feel his eyes on me. He didn't browse or even pretend to shop. He came straight to the counter. "Give me the phone," he demanded, his voice cold and firm. I froze for a second, unsure of what to do. "I don't know what you're talking about," I lied, gripping the phone under the counter. His gaze hardened, and he leaned in closer. "You're making a mistake," he hissed, before turning around and leaving without another word. I didn't relax until the door closed behind him, but even then, I had this sick feeling in my gut. He wasn't done. The next morning, I heard the news. Ra had been found dead in an alley just a few blocks away. A note was found in his pocket that simply read, "She has the phone." I felt my stomach churn as I realized I might have been the reason Rob was killed. I immediately handed the phone over to the police, explaining everything that had happened. They checked it out, but came back with nothing. No strange messages, no hidden apps, just a regular phone. They assured me that I had nothing to worry about, but I wasn't convinced. From that night on, every time I worked the night shift, I saw him, the man in the black hoodie. He never came inside again, but he was always there, lurking just outside, watching. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was waiting for the right moment, and every night I wondered if it would be my last.